For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the morning of July 12, 2000, 22-year-old Jason Fox left his towel and sandals on the shore of Clearwater Beach, Florida, and entered the sparkling waters for a routine snorkel. He never returned. Despite an extensive search involving the Coast Guard and local authorities, Jason vanished without a trace, leaving his family in agonizing uncertainty. For 24 years, the mystery of his disappearance haunted his loved ones. Then, in February of 2024, a seemingly insignificant discovery was made miles offshore: a tarnished ID bracelet snagged on a fisherman's anchor. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Jason Fox and how a single piece of metal finally unlocked the truth. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. Clearwater Beach, Florida, August 12, 2000. The sun beat down on the white sand, the turquoise water shimmering under a cloudless sky. Tourists flocked to the shoreline, drawn by the promise of sun and surf. Among them was Jason Fox, a 22-year-old college athlete with a passion for the ocean. A part-time dive instructor, Jason was known for his infectious enthusiasm and love for marine life. He had an easy smile, a quick wit, and a deep tan that spoke of countless hours spent in the Florida sun. Those who knew him best described him as a vibrant young man with a bright future. Home videos show a beaming Jason surrounded by family and friends, his laughter echoing in the Florida air. His sister, Whitney Pratt, remembers him as her protector, her confidant, the glue that held their family together. That Saturday morning, Jason told his family he was going snorkeling. He packed a towel, his favorite pair of sandals, and his snorkeling gear, excited to explore a reef he'd heard about from a fellow diver. The weather was perfect, the water calm. Several beachgoers later recalled seeing a young man fitting Jason's description enter the water near Pier 60. He waved to a family setting up their umbrella, his smile visible even from a distance. It was the last time anyone saw him alive. Later that afternoon, a lifeguard making his rounds noticed an unattended towel and a pair of sandals neatly placed near the water's edge. He recognized the distinctive sea turtle design on the towel, a design Jason's sister had given him for his birthday. A sense of unease settled over him as he scanned the water, but there was no sign of the young snorkeler. As the sun began to set and Jason failed to return, his family's concern escalated into panic. They contacted the authorities, and a full-scale search and rescue operation was launched. The Coast Guard dispatched boats and helicopters, their searchlights cutting through the growing darkness. Divers combed the seabed, while volunteers scoured the shoreline. The search continued through the night and into the following days, but yielded nothing. No sign of Jason, no trace of his snorkeling gear. The initial optimism slowly gave way to a gnawing fear, then to a desperate hope for any news, any clue that might explain his disappearance. For Jason's family and friends, the days that followed were a blur of agonizing uncertainty. The vibrant young man, full of life and promise, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a towel, a pair of sandals, and a growing mountain of unanswered questions. The disappearance of Jason Fox sparked an immediate and intensive investigation by the Clearwater Police Department. Detectives began by interviewing witnesses who had been on the beach that day. Several individuals recalled seeing a young man matching Jason's description enter the water, but no one reported seeing him struggle or encounter any difficulties. The lack of eyewitnesses to any potential incident presented a significant challenge for investigators. The initial focus centered on the possibility of accidental drowning. Experienced lifeguards and oceanographers were consulted, and they analyzed the prevailing currents and tides on the day of Jason's disappearance. While they acknowledged the possibility of a strong undertow pulling a swimmer out to sea, they also noted that the conditions on that particular day were relatively calm. Furthermore, Jason was a strong swimmer and experienced diver, making an accidental drowning less likely. Another theory considered was that Jason might have become disoriented or entangled in something underwater. Divers meticulously searched the area where he was last seen, but found no evidence of entanglement or any sign of his snorkeling gear. The possibility of foul play was also explored, although the absence of any signs of a struggle or any indication of a motive made this theory less probable in the early stages of the investigation. Detectives interviewed Jason's family and friends, searching for any clues that might shed light on his disappearance. They learned about his plans for the day, his usual snorkeling habits, and his general state of mind. Nothing in their interviews suggested any reason why Jason would intentionally disappear or that he was facing any personal problems that might have contributed to his vanishing. As days turned into weeks, and the extensive search efforts continued to yield no results, the investigation began to stall. The lack of concrete evidence, the absence of a body, and the multiple plausible scenarios made it difficult for investigators to determine what had happened to Jason. With no new leads to pursue, the case was eventually classified as a missing person, possibly drowned, and the active investigation was scaled back. The case remained open, but without any new information, it gradually grew cold, leaving Jason's family in a painful limbo, grappling with the unanswered questions surrounding his disappearance. Years passed, seasons changed, but the agonizing uncertainty surrounding Jason Fox's disappearance remained a constant ache for his family and friends. Birthdays and holidays were marked by a palpable absence, a reminder of the vibrant young man who should have been there, sharing in the laughter and joy. Whitney Pratt, Jason's sister, became the keeper of his memory, tirelessly organizing searches, contacting authorities, and keeping his case in the public eye. She refused to let her brother be forgotten, clinging to the hope that one day, somehow, the truth would be revealed. The family marked anniversaries of his disappearance with quiet gatherings, sharing stories and memories of Jason, their voices often choked with emotion. They held on to the hope, however faint, that he might still be alive, somewhere out there. Periodically, the Clearwater Police Department would review the cold case file, hoping that new technology or a fresh perspective might uncover a previously overlooked clue. Detectives revisited the initial witness statements, re-examined the limited physical evidence, and explored any new leads that emerged, but the case remained stubbornly resistant to resolution. The years brought advancements in forensic science and investigative techniques, but none of these breakthroughs provided the answers that Jason's family so desperately sought. The file grew thicker with each passing year, filled with reports, interviews, and analyses, but the central question, what happened to Jason Fox, remained unanswered. Sergeant Elena Sanders, a seasoned detective with a reputation for tenacity, inherited the cold case file years later. She pored over the voluminous documents, studying the photographs, reviewing the witness testimonies, and immersing herself in the details of the investigation. She was struck by the thoroughness of the initial investigation, but also by the frustrating lack of concrete evidence. The case represented not just a puzzle to be solved, but a young life cut short, a family left in limbo. The weight of that responsibility settled on Sergeant Sanders' shoulders, fueling her determination to bring closure to Jason's family and finally answer the questions that had haunted them for so long. The unsolved disappearance of Jason Fox was a stark reminder of the limitations of law enforcement, the frustrating reality that some cases, despite the best efforts of investigators, remain shrouded in mystery. It was a testament to the enduring pain of unanswered questions, the enduring hope of a family that refused to give up. 24 years had passed since Jason Fox vanished into the Florida surf. The initial flurry of activity, the desperate searches, the fervent media attention, had all faded with time, leaving behind a quiet ache of unanswered questions. Then, in the spring of 2024, a seemingly insignificant event would shatter the silence and reignite the investigation. Dale Malloy, a local fisherman, was hauling up his anchor near the Hurricane Pass, a channel several miles from where Jason was last seen. He felt an unusual snag, a resistance that suggested something more than the usual seabed debris. As he pulled harder, a glint of metal flashed beneath the surface. He initially thought it was a piece of discarded fishing tackle, but as he brought it closer, he realized it was a tarnished silver bracelet, heavily encrusted with marine growth. He scrubbed away the layers of corrosion, revealing an engraved name, Jason Fox. Malloy felt a chill run down his spine. He'd heard stories of the missing snorkeler, a local legend whispered among the fishing community. He knew the name, the circumstances, the enduring mystery that had haunted the town for decades. Could this corroded piece of metal be a tangible link to the vanished young man? He examined the bracelet more closely, noticing dark, almost black, stains clinging to the metal. They looked like dried blood. Malloy's initial disbelief quickly turned to a sense of responsibility. He knew he had stumbled upon something potentially significant, something that could finally provide answers to a decades-old mystery. He carefully wrapped the bracelet in a cloth, his hands trembling slightly, and immediately contacted the Clearwater Police Department. The bracelet was quickly taken into evidence, its discovery sending ripples of excitement and apprehension through the small coastal community. The engraved name, the possible bloodstains, the proximity to where Jason had disappeared, it was all too much to be a coincidence. The Clearwater Police Department, now under the leadership of Sergeant Elena Sanders, immediately sent the bracelet to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's crime laboratory for DNA analysis. The dried blood, though degraded by years of exposure to saltwater, was carefully extracted and compared to DNA samples provided by Jason's family. The results, when they came back, were conclusive. The blood on the bracelet belonged to Jason Fox. The discovery of the ID bracelet, a tangible piece of the puzzle that had been missing for so long, breathed new life into the investigation. It was a beacon of hope for Jason's family, a sign that perhaps, after all these years, they might finally learn what happened to their beloved son and brother. But the bracelet's discovery also raised a new set of questions. How did it end up where it was found, miles from where Jason was last seen? And what did the presence of blood signify? The answers, Sergeant Sanders knew, lay hidden within the corroded metal, waiting to be unlocked. The rediscovery of Jason Fox's ID bracelet, confirmed by DNA analysis, propelled Sergeant Elena Sanders and her team into a renewed investigation. The bracelet itself became the focal point, a silent witness holding the potential key to unlocking the decades-old mystery. Under the bright lights of the forensics lab, Sergeant Sanders meticulously examined the corroded silver. The engraved name, now barely legible beneath the layers of marine growth, served as a stark reminder of the young life lost. As she rotated the bracelet under the magnifying glass, a series of fine, parallel scratches caught her eye. They were faint, almost invisible to the naked eye, but under magnification, their pattern became clear. They were consistent with the markings left by a boat propeller. This discovery shifted the focus of the investigation to boat traffic in the area around the time of Jason's disappearance. Sergeant Sanders and her team began reviewing maritime records, Coast Guard logs, and local marina records from August 2000. They were looking for any vessels, large or small, that had been operating in the vicinity of Pier 60 on the day Jason vanished. Witness testimonies from the initial investigation were revisited, with a renewed focus on any mention of boats in the area. One witness, a tourist who had been taking photographs on the pier, recalled seeing a white party boat with a distinctive blue stripe operating near the area where Jason was last seen. Another witness, a local fisherman, remembered seeing the same boat anchored near the Hurricane Pass later that afternoon. The description of the boat led investigators to Ryan Zimmerman, the owner and captain of the Seabreeze, a popular party boat known for its sunset cruises and fishing charters. Zimmerman's name had surfaced briefly in the initial investigation, but with no evidence linking him to Jason's disappearance, he had been treated as a peripheral witness. Now, with the discovery of the propeller marks on Jason's bracelet, Zimmerman became a person of interest. Concurrent with the investigation into Zimmerman, Sergeant Sanders interviewed Jason's sister, Whitney Pratt, once again. During this interview, Pratt recalled a conversation she had with Jason a few weeks before his disappearance. Jason had expressed concerns about illegal treasure salvaging activity he'd witnessed offshore. He believed a group of divers were illegally recovering artifacts from a protected shipwreck, and he suspected they were using a local charter boat as their base of operations. He hadn't mentioned any names, but Pratt remembered him saying the boat was white with a blue stripe. The description matched the Seabreeze, and it provided a possible motive for Jason's disappearance. If he had stumbled upon an illegal operation, he might have become a threat to those involved. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fall into place, pointing towards Ryan Zimmerman and his party boat. The propeller marks on the bracelet, the witness testimonies placing his boat near the scene, and Jason's concerns about illegal salvaging activity all converged to create a compelling, albeit circumstantial, case against Zimmerman. The interrogation room was small, sparsely furnished, the air thick with tension. Ryan Zimmerman, the tanned and weathered captain of the Seabreeze, sat opposite Sergeant Sanders, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He initially maintained his innocence, claiming he had no recollection of seeing Jason Fox on the day of his disappearance. He insisted his boat had been operating its usual route, a sunset cruise along the coast, and he had no reason to be near the area where Jason was last seen snorkeling. He denied any involvement in illegal salvaging activities, dismissing Jason's suspicions as the ramblings of an overzealous amateur diver. Sergeant Sanders presented Zimmerman with the evidence they had gathered, the witness testimonies placing his boat near the scene, the discovery of Jason's ID bracelet near the Hurricane Pass, and, most damningly, the forensic analysis of the bracelet, revealing the propeller marks and the presence of Jason's blood. Zimmerman's confident demeanor began to crumble. He shifted nervously in his chair, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding direct contact with Sergeant Sanders. He offered alternative explanations for the evidence, suggesting the bracelet might have been lost at sea and later snagged by his anchor, that the blood could have come from a fish he'd cleaned on deck. His explanations, however, lacked conviction, riddled with inconsistencies and contradictions. As the interrogation stretched on, the weight of the evidence, combined with Sergeant Sanders' relentless questioning, began to take its toll. Zimmerman's denials became less forceful, his voice barely above a whisper. He finally admitted he had been in the area where Jason was snorkeling, but claimed it was purely coincidental. He said he hadn't seen Jason in the water and had no idea how the bracelet ended up on his anchor. Sergeant Sanders then played her trump card. She revealed that they had a warrant to search the sea breeze, and that a dive team was already en route to examine the boat's propeller. She explained that any forensic evidence found on the propeller, coupled with the existing evidence, would be enough to secure a conviction. Faced with the imminent prospect of irrefutable physical evidence, Zimmerman's carefully constructed facade finally collapsed. He broke down, confessing that he had indeed struck Jason with his boat, but that it had been an accident. He claimed he hadn't seen Jason in the water and hadn't realized he'd hit anything until he felt a thud against the hull. He panicked, fearing the consequences of a boating accident, and decided to keep the incident a secret. He admitted retrieving the bracelet from the water, keeping it as a grim trophy of his fateful mistake. He later discarded the bracelet near the Hurricane Pass, hoping to erase any connection to the incident. Further questioning revealed a more sinister truth. Zimmerman confessed that he had been involved in a drug smuggling operation, using his boat to transport narcotics from the Bahamas to Florida. He had been making a drop-off near the reef where Jason was snorkeling when Jason surfaced unexpectedly, witnessing the illicit transaction. Fearing exposure, Zimmerman had deliberately steered his boat towards Jason, striking him with the propeller. He claimed he hadn't intended to kill Jason, only to scare him away, but the impact had been fatal. Dr. Jennifer Lyons, a forensic specialist with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, played a crucial role in corroborating Zimmerman's confession. Her analysis of the propeller marks on the bracelet confirmed they were consistent with the damage found on the Sea Breeze's propeller. Microscopic analysis of the dried blood on the bracelet revealed traces of seawater and marine microorganisms, supporting Zimmerman's claim that the bracelet had been submerged for a considerable period. Dr. Lyons also analyzed the paint chips found on the bracelet, matching them to the paint used on the Sea Breeze. Her expert testimony provided the crucial scientific evidence that linked Zimmerman to Jason's death. For Jason's family, the news of Zimmerman's confession and the confirmation of his involvement in Jason's death brought a mixture of relief and profound grief. The years of unanswered questions, the agonizing uncertainty, had finally come to an end. They now knew the truth, a truth far more tragic and brutal than they could have ever imagined. The knowledge of what had happened to Jason, while devastating, also brought a sense of closure, a painful but necessary step in their long journey towards healing. The trial of Ryan Zimmerman captivated the coastal community, reopening old wounds and bringing the tragic story of Jason Fox back into the public consciousness. The prosecution presented a compelling case, weaving together witness testimonies, forensic evidence, and Zimmerman's own confession to create a damning narrative of reckless indifference and a desperate attempt to cover up a crime. The defense argued that the incident had been a tragic accident, a consequence of poor visibility and unfortunate circumstances. They painted Zimmerman as a remorseful man who had panicked in the aftermath of an unintentional collision. The jury, however, was unconvinced. After days of deliberation, they returned a verdict of guilty on the charge of manslaughter. The judge, acknowledging the devastating impact of Zimmerman's actions on Jason's family and the community, sentenced him to 20 years in prison. The conviction brought a sense of justice to Clearwater Beach, a town that had long carried the weight of Jason's unsolved disappearance. For Jason's family, the verdict marked the end of a long and arduous journey. The relief of finally knowing the truth was palpable, but it was intertwined with the profound grief of losing Jason in such a senseless and violent manner. Whitney Pratt, Jason's sister, spoke on behalf of the family, her voice trembling with emotion. She expressed gratitude to the investigators, the prosecutors, and the jury for bringing Zimmerman to justice. She spoke of the pain of living for 24 years without knowing what had happened to her brother, the constant wondering, the endless what-ifs that had haunted their family for so long. While the conviction couldn't bring Jason back, it provided a measure of closure, allowing them to finally begin the process of healing. The resolution of Jason Fox's case underscored the importance of persistence in solving cold cases. It highlighted the critical role of forensic science in uncovering the truth, even after decades have passed. The tiny scratches on a corroded bracelet, barely visible to the naked eye, had ultimately led to the unraveling of a carefully constructed lie and the conviction of a man who had thought he could escape justice. The case also served as a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of reckless actions. Jason Fox, a young man with a promising future, had been robbed of his life by a moment of panic and a desperate attempt to conceal a crime. His story resonated with the community, prompting reflection on the importance of accountability and the enduring power of hope in the face of tragedy. In the years that followed, Jason's family worked tirelessly to keep his memory alive. They established a scholarship fund in his name, supporting young athletes pursuing their dreams of marine biology and oceanography. They organized an annual beach cleanup in his honor, reminding the community of the beauty and fragility of the marine environment that Jason loved so much. Jason Fox's legacy lived on, not only in the memories of those who knew and loved him, but also in the positive impact he continued to have on the community, a testament to a life tragically cut short, but not forgotten.